Welcome to Get After It with Nashy, brought to you by Ace Property Management and Sales.
Yeah, I'm great. Thank you very much for coming on. And
a pleasure. Thanks for asking me.
Look at us. We're on time. We're early. We're good to go. I always talk about my kids at the start of a podcast that they're quiet. They're in the house, but they're occupied, and everything is good. So yeah, no, here we are, and I appreciate it because you must be busy. As we'll dive straight into this, because obviously just back from Tokyo a wee while now, but the seasons have all started. Rugby's started. Football's going. And I know they're sort of watching everything that you've been doing over the last couple of years, and we'd bump into each other at Murrayfield and things like that. But yeah, you're busy. How are things?
Things are great. Thanks for asking me. As I hope they are with you too. And it's in the same token, it's great to see the podcast and the Get After It movement going from strength to strength. I see the guests you have on. I listen when I can, and it's great to see what we started as a wee podcast you were doing during lockdown or whenever it was, really flourishing. So good on you as well. But
thank you.
It's been awesome, mate. The summer's been terrific. Tokyo was an incredible experience. I'm sure we'll get into it as the chat progresses. But the chance to go out there, initially it'd been about a year and a half in the making. Having I think like most of the guys who were due to work on there, we were supposed to have gone in 2020. So. We'd all been kind of contracted and asked and signed up a long time before the games actually happened. So it had been a seriously long build-up, but the experience itself was just phenomenal. I would say from a personal note, it delivered everything that I wanted it to in terms of getting, my first experience of a proper trip away professionally. I'd never been away from home. With work, really with anything for that length of time. We were gone for 50 days, just over those who did both the Olympics and the Paralympics. So effectively 2 months living out of a hotel, with a certain degree of obviously COVID-19 restrictions as well that were in place in Japan. So that was different, but it was really invigorating as well. That from a sporting perspective, obviously you've literally got ringside, trackside, poolside, pitchside seats to the greatest sporting event on the planet. I was lucky enough to cover some of the sevens, which were just fantastic, even without a crowd. It was still a tremendous spectacle, and some of the rugby on show was just sensational. You look at some of the Fijian boys, and it's no surprise to see quite a few of them picking up contracts in Europe. Particularly excited to see how Aseli Tuivuaka goes at Zebra. He was an absolute juggernaut out there in the Tokyo Stadium, and intrigued to see where they play him actually. But that's a chat for another day. The sport was awesome. That's what I'm trying to say. But the sport was brilliant, and the stuff away from the sport, the life experience you get for someone like me who's a pretty inexperienced journalist, certainly a rookie commentator. The chance to go out there, meet new people. I don't want to use the sort of slightly crude term of networking, but you certainly do. You get to meet people from all over the world. You make, first and foremost, you make friends, but you also make probably a degree of professional contacts as well who can help you out, or who might be useful either to you or from you in the months and years ahead. So it was just brilliant, and we had a lot of fun as well. The restrictions were in place, but they weren't as severe as what I'd anticipated, and we got to do plenty of sightseeing and plenty of socialising in and around that as well. So it was just an awesome couple of months out there.
I don't want to skip what you touched on there, networking, because I like that you brought that up, and I've enjoyed watching you and what you do now and what the rugby you're commentating on and getting Olympic trips and things like that. But where did it all start for you? Has journalism always been the goal? Have you always been sort of a Bill McLaren history? As a young laddie, you were in the stands commentating to yourself and these sorts of things. How did you get the start?
It's funny. It's funny you mentioned Bill McLaren. Actually, now I look back on it, there was definitely an element of that passion in me when I was a kid. I can still remember. Going off on a wild tangent. I remember my first visit to Murrayfield. I think I was 6, and it was Scotland were playing on those horrific orange strips in 2000, and they lost to France at Murrayfield. It was the first time my dad had taken me along, and I still remember actually climbing the stairs in the concourse. And I'm sure every kid has that moment where you climb up and you actually set eyes on the pitch for the first time, and you're like, oh my God, that is the actual pitch. I'm inside the stadium. I can see Kenny Logan and Andy Nicol and Townsend and all these guys that you'd watch on the TV. The noise, the colour, everything was there. But I'd always been a bit of a rugby obsessive as a kid, without really realising that, journalism and commentary could be a fruitful career path. Probably because it is such a niche career within what isn't the biggest sport in the country. But no, I wanted to work with animals. I wanted to be a vet when I was a kid. I wanted to be a marine biologist or a vet or a zoologist or a scientist of some kind. So I went down that route initially. Went to vet school for 2 years at Glasgow Uni, and I can confidently say that I was the worst vet student the faculty has ever made the heinous mistake of admitting into its famous fold, as any of my contemporaries and mates who are all now successful graduated vets all over the world would attest to. I was hopeless. In fact, I did get a grade H for hopeless in one of my exams once, which my sole contribution was name, matric number, and having a bash at a few multiple choice questions. Then I realised I've got not a great deal else to offer here. And I was only 19. I remember dropping out and thinking, bloody hell, what on earth do I do now? And I kind of blundered into this sort of vague, circuitous route into journalism by accident, in terms of I wrote a few blogs now and then just because I thought this could be something interesting, something fun. I love rugby, I love football, I love arguing the toss about, whether, I don't know, Nick DeLuca or Andy Henderson should be playing in the centre for Scotland with my mates in the pub. So why not try and put some of those thoughts down on paper and see if anybody agrees, disagrees, or exactly. So I did some work for the rugby blog, which is just unpaid work, doing some columns, which they are still available online if anyone wants to go and have a laugh. They're horrendously written. I hope my writing's come on a bit in the last 7 years, but those were some shockers. Did some work for Planet Rugby, the rugby news website, remotely, just from home. And then off the back of that, managed to get into the BBC on a trainee scheme. So that was a year rotating around all sorts of different departments within the BBC. I think there were 10 departments, and you spent about 4.5, 5 weeks with each. And it was like everything from.
Was the Rugby Planet, was that you just sending in blogs, or did you get an opportunity? Did you know someone in already? What were you doing? Were you just hoping, doing the work, sending it in and seeing if anyone would get back to you?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, at that time, my options were annoy people, pester people, try my best to get that size 12 in a door somewhere. And in the meantime, just continue pulling pints at the golf club at the end of the road, which was my summer job for 4 summers on the trot. And if the rugby and the journalism and the commentary ultimately hadn't worked out, I still have no idea what I would have done. And it's quite a not a scary thing. Well, I guess it's a little bit scary to admit that you look now and you go, what if something, suddenly all the work dried up? Because as a freelancer, that is a concern. You go, Chris, what on earth would I do? I don't have no idea how to do anything else. So, and I don't think the vet school would be for letting me back in after the grade H in biomolecular sciences. So, no, it was literally Nashy. It was just annoying people until they clicked on your stuff, read an article, looked at a Word document. And that is probably very much the story of my career. The opportunities I've had more recently with commentary, the bulk of them have come from annoying people, sending lots of emails, adding folk on LinkedIn, finding an email address and going from there. And I think that's the case for a lot of folk. I wouldn't say there's a defined path anymore for my limited experience anyway for doing this kind of work. And
has it ever been the sort of the feedback that you've not got enough experience, you can't do this? I mean, what have the knockbacks been like for you?
Never really for lack of experience. I mean, on the commentary side of things, it was a struggle to get a foot in the door there, because you need somebody to give you an opportunity to actually have some commentary to show people. Otherwise, you're just somebody saying, I think I might be all right at this. I love rugby. I think I've got a decent voice, any chance. And the man who actually took a punt on me was a guy called Craig Coughlin, who you may know or you may know through social media, who's the very, very good director who directed a lot of the BBC Alaba coverage prior to Premier Sports taking the rights for what was then the Pro 12 and is now the URC. And Craig still does a lot of the football and other content, sports content that Alba shows. And I'd met him a few times at Murrayfield just when I was there for Planet Rugby, and they wanted someone to do the red button English language stuff. And he said, look, I've read your stuff. You know the game. I think you've got a good voice. I've heard you do radio bulletins and stuff. I think do you want to have a go at it? And it was like just this incredible opportunity falls into your lap through, not necessarily through the strength of your broadcast work, but through the strength of, you know, your knowledge of the game, your character, and maybe a little bit of your written stuff that's made an impact. But in terms of knockbacks, yeah, I mean, I had a contract at the BBC for just a 6-month short-term contract when I was 23. This is going back sort of 4.5 years, and it was kind of indicated that no, you should be okay. We should be able to make you staff and basically make this contract permanent at the end. And long story short, for various financial reasons, as far as I could tell, they weren't able to do that. They couldn't make that commitment, which was tough to take at the time, because you're going, God, what on earth do I do now? Like, are they going to still give me freelance work? They say they will, but can they? What are the rules? Can they even give someone who they've effectively let go? Can they just bring them straight back in as a contractor? And I was really struggling to get work for a while, and I actually had thoughts of I might need to chuck this. I might need to give this up, because, you know, yes, at 23 without a family, your outgoings are small, but there's still concerns around, you know, how I need to pay the rent. I need to do things, whether I need to go and get just a normal quote unquote job just to pay the bills and hopefully try and pick this up later on. I don't know, but it was a bit of a fraught time for a few months, and luckily I got the opportunity with BBC Alba, which then led to having something to take to the likes of BT Sport and Premier Sport and go, look, here's a selection of 4 or 5 games that I've done. Here's a showreel which a very, very skilled editor colleague, guy called Scott Curry, the BBC put together for me very kindly over a summer. And that's what led to the opportunities that I had latterly with BT. And had I not had that opportunity, I honestly don't know what I'd be doing now. It's not really answering your question in terms of knockbacks, but they do come. They're never fun, but you just kind of have to take it on the chin and go, well, there's a reason why, you know. And sometimes you'll go for, or you'll send an email to an exec producer, and they'll say, Jamie, we like your stuff, but actually we're staffed up. We don't need any more, or we don't need. We're already contracted to 3 or 4 guys, and you find out who the guys are and go, these guys have been doing it for 20 years, so yeah, you can't really have too many complaints when you've been in the door 2 minutes and you can't get every single gig that you want. So there needs to be a degree of magnanimity as well, but I think you just have to try and be as resilient as you can, and you know, eventually I hope opportunities come.
That's the journalist in you. What did you say there? Magnanimity? That's a new one.
Magnanimity, yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay, maybe that's a cool word. Yeah, yeah. But it's something that from the journalism side to the commentary side to the presenting. Have you done much presenting on that side of things? Is that a world you'd like to get into? When just the rugby community, the dinner speeches, there's so much, I think, opportunity, but then there's a lot of people doing it, you know, and there's a lot of people, and it's standing out. It's getting that CV under your belt, and it's similar to what I do with the podcast. It's only after I've had numbers and well over 100 shows and sort of guest upon guest upon guest that you can keep going back to people. And when I get the door slammed shut all the time, and it's about just finding ways around it. And I'm still searching my way through this podcast world, but where you position yourself now, and where I see you popping up, and I see, is it Sale at the weekend you were commentating on?
That's right, yeah.
You know, and there's the after dinner, there's the gigs when you're down there, there's the gigs when you're around the country, when you're in Tokyo. It's exciting. You know, I'm excited for you when I speak to my guests and people that I want to know how they got after it, how they overcame things, of what the future might hold for you, whether it's written or the spoken word. It's an exciting time, and with the world opening back up and fans in stadiums, it's all positive.
Yeah, it is. It's really positive. Not to go with the old COVID pun, it is really positive, and I think I really appreciate your kind words on that as well, Nashy. The support that I've had on just on social media and stuff after you do a game, and you know, someone might send you a nice tweet. You do get some folk that will just be like, who is this? And then they'll find your Twitter handle and stuff, and it's probably a tiny fraction of what a player gets on any given match day if they drop a pass or they miss a kick or they don't have a stellar performance. And I know a lot of the boys have spoken, and girls have spoken really well about the potential toxicity of social media, but it is lovely when you get that support, and it kind of probably just reinforces that. Well, actually, you do, especially at a young age. I think you do get a little bit of imposter syndrome sometimes. You find yourself sitting at a stadium about to commentate an international match, and you look around you, and my 27th birthday last year, I was very fortunate to be doing some work for Amazon Prime at the time, who took the rights for the autumn internationals, and I was sitting at Park of Scarlets about to do Wales v Georgia with Sam Warburton, Jamie Roberts as my co-coms, and Scott Quinnell and Mark Durden-Smith doing the trackside press. And you're like, Jesus, that's 3 British and Irish Lions, one of the best presenters that has ever worked in rugby or indeed any sport. I think Durders is tremendous. And then me sitting there like this little 27-year-old Scottish chubby kid sitting in the stand. I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, you're just waiting for somebody to come and tap you on the shoulder and be like, big man, come on now.
Can I see your ticket? Can I see your ticket?
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, you don't see me in the seat, son. So you do get that now and again, but I love what I do, and I'm very, very lucky to be doing it. But no, in terms of the where I'm positioning myself, I try and be an all rounder. Really, I think I'm far too young and inexperienced and new to it all to be wanting to be pigeonholed or to pigeonhole myself as, he's a commentator or he's this or he's that. Maybe that's to my detriment in some cases, because people that maybe haven't, I guess, seen your stuff before think he is a writer, he is a broadcaster. Not, he's both. But I love the variety in my working week. For example, today I was working on an interview piece that will be going out in a few days' time for the 15, part of the Rugby Pass network. And I was also doing a little bit of prep because I'm going down to Newcastle for a BT game against Wasps on the Saturday. So yeah, I love the variety that provides. In terms of presenting, I do a little bit for Ross County TV, which has been tremendous fun. That was awesome last season, and the way that club in particular, probably more so than any club in the Scottish Premiership, bought into that concept and delivered a product. And I'm not just saying that because I was involved in it, and obviously there's a degree of professional pride and bias, but they had, I'm sure all of your rugby and football listeners will be familiar with Rory Hamilton, who's a good friend of mine and who is probably the voice of Scottish rugby and Scottish football at the moment in terms of covering the URC, covering the cups in football, the Premiership in football, big European games in football. For Ross County to get him and Stephen Craigan, who again is an absolutely first-class pundit, and obviously little me involved as the sort of third wheel of that triumvirate, it was brilliant. And the buy-in from the club, from the supporters, the access we had to the players was awesome. And I think the product they put on for fans who couldn't attend matches because of the COVID situation was tremendous. So getting to do a bit of studio presentation with that was brilliant fun. I loved it. We've kept it going again this season. The club are keen to keep it going. So I'll be up there as often as I can this season as well, doing a little bit more of that. So hopefully another string to the bow, albeit it's a string that requires a lot of tuning at the moment, but it's something I've thoroughly enjoyed.
I like, go back to that Scarlets game where you were around Warburton, Jamie Roberts and all these guys around you. I'm lucky enough to have interviewed Andrew Cotter a couple of times. He talks about being in the commentary booth with Andy Murray beside him. He was there when Andy Murray did his first commentary at Wimbledon. He was with Andrew Cotter. What's your experience like there? I know you're sitting beside Lions legends, but you've got to be in the moment, but there must be some times when you're listening to Sam Warburton dissect a breakdown and you just realise, oh shit, I'm supposed to be, I'm next to you. You're in the room, you're supposed to speak, but you're around these sort of legends of the game, and you must be. Does it happen to you? A bit starstruck when you're actually there, or are you able to just sort of stay in the zone and get on with things?
I don't know if I've ever been properly starstruck, because you're focusing on your job, but there are definite pinch yourself moments where, like before actually I've been down to Wales quite a lot recently, but before a Scarlets Sale, the Champions Cup last year, and it was like Sam was there, Shane Williams was there, and Chris Ashton was there, and they're all like, we're sitting in one of the rooms in the stadium beforehand, having a bite to eat and a coffee and just chatting away. And the old sort of 2 ears, one mouth, use them in proportion rule is sort of one that I try to follow when you're around company like that, because they're talking about things they did on Lions tours and capers and funny stories about, one of the coaches that's involved this weekend, or, they've heard a bit of chat from someone they know, and it's fascinating stuff. It's often hilarious stuff. It's like, the kind of stuff you'd hear on the after dinner circuit or in someone's autobiography, and sometimes it's even too hot for that.
Yeah.
So me going, once I was on a new rugby tour to Dublin, and somebody threw something overboard. Like, it's not really going to cut the ice much, is it? So just try and shut up and listen and enjoy the company you're in. But also, the thing is as well, these guys, and I don't know what Andrew was saying in regards to Andy Murray, but these guys tend to take a similarly rigorous approach. Certainly Sam Warburton does, which is why he's one of the very, very best there is, to anything they do outside of rugby, as they did to actually preparing themselves and their bodies and their minds to play at the top level. So they're looking to you at times for a bit of advice or a bit of guidance. And that's the moment where you sometimes go, Christ, what do I tell these, like, do you want me to say this then? Or when do you want me to come in then? And that's when you have to be quite clear in your mind as to how you want that broadcast to go.
Yeah.
And there are times where in commentary, you have to tell these guys to shut up because the referee's speaking. And you can actually feel it's almost a bit schoolmasterly. And you're not literally shouting down the mic, shut up, don't speak just now. But it might be like raising a hand or just looking along and catching someone's eye or pointing at the monitor.
Yeah.
And you kind of go after as you go, buddy, I just told the lion to stop talking. Like things like that. So yeah, it's more the fact, I would say, that at times they look to you for a bit of guidance, because at the end of the day, I remember the first commentary I did, which was a sort of triple-handed, a three-person commentary, was with Johnny Beattie, who's a tremendous analyst, and Hugo Monye as well, who's, again, not only a tremendous analyst, but it seems a brilliant dancer and an all-round great bloke from the times that I've spent with him. And he was like, mate, like, you're the captain up there, you're in charge, you just tell us this and tell us that. And I was like, okay, like, sorry, yeah, no worries. But you do get used to that quite quickly, and there's a lot of kind of learning by doing goes on as well. You can do all the research and analysis and homework and talking to other commentators and to friends and to people in the production side of things. But ultimately, I think commentary, I've found, is something that you improve at immensely by getting a good run at it, and practicing. But yeah, for sure, there are those pinch yourself moments where, like, wow, bloody hell, like, look at the people I'm sitting alongside here, and look at the stage that I'm almost ridiculously enough sharing with these people.
Yeah, it's a great point you've made there, and I wasn't looking at it that way, and I've never really thought they're looking for guidance from you. They've got the expertise in certain areas of the pitch or certain things that might go on. Or you hear Nigel Owens at the moment, who I think is a great addition to commentary. Just the way he can, you hear like Will Greenwood going like, "What do you think, Nige?" And there's a breakdown or a yellow card or something, and Nigel's giving the referee's point of view. But yeah, they're looking to you for guidance and to control things and to sort of lead the ship in the commentary role. That's an interesting way to look at it. Yeah, absolutely. What about the noises in your ears when you're mic'd up to the producer or the director? How did you take to that side of it? Because I get named.
That was one of the hardest things, mate. Because I was so naive when I did my first games on those BBC Alba matches. First one was Edinburgh Leinster at Myerside, and I remember sitting in the kind of makeshift broadcast cabin opposite the main stand, which they'd constructed while Edinburgh were kind of playing their home games there.
Yeah.
And Cockerell's first season, Edinburgh won, great game, and you kind of put your cans on. And sorry, there's a car alarm going off outside, so apologies. That's
it's all good. But, don't worry.
Yeah, so you put your cans on, and you don't appreciate, having never done it before, having never really known what it was going to be like. You don't appreciate just how many voices are in your ear, and that there'd probably be fewer voices on that broadcast than there would be on some of the internationals, where there's an additional person, there's a world feed producer, there's just more stuff going on, and there might be. That was me commentating on my own as well, so there was no pundit to listen to and pay attention to and have to bounce off, and the ebbs and flows. So at any given time, you could have like director, producer, the PA who's doing the counts, who's telling you, when the team sheets come up on screen, there's a count to hit. So there'll be somebody going 10, 9, 8, 7, by which point you've got to stop talking about the France team that's up on screen. There'll be a graphics person who's in your ear telling you what's going to be coming up on the screen, or indeed they'll sometimes be telling you a useful stat. The BT have got some incredibly rigorous and talented stats people who produce packs of data for commentators and anybody working on the broadcast. And they'll sometimes just feed a little stat into your ear during the game. And you've obviously got one, maybe two, maybe even three pundits, I think, of as well. So, and the referee. So you've got 6, 7, 8 voices at any given time during a match to sort of
navigate.
Yeah, navigate's the perfect word. To listen to tune in and out of. I mean, you know, the director. Sorry, I don't know what I'm asking over this.
You're doing really well. You're doing really well with the distraction in the background. You could almost be a professional broadcaster.
I think there's Heinland's worst car thief is currently in operation on my street just now in the tenements. But hopefully, whatever car it is will come out and
we'll dull it down. We'll dull the background.
Yeah, sorry about that. But yeah, no. So there are a lot of voices to take in, and you learn to sort of to manage that. I think is the best way of putting it, because you don't need to know all that stuff all the time that's being said. Some of it's not being said to you, some of it's not being said for your benefit, but some of it really is. And things like the director telling you what he's about or she is about to show you on the screen, very, very important. So you know what's coming up next. And at times you can lead that as well. You can sometimes steer that on a broadcast where there maybe isn't another pundit, or there isn't as many people sort of on the airwaves. You might start speaking about a player, and the director will look on his bank of cameras and go, "I've got a shot of that player there, so let's cut to him and show you that player as you're speaking about him or her." But yeah, like it's difficult and it takes some getting used to. And I think it's probably something I'm still adjusting to, because there's sometimes it can all be at different sound levels as well. So you've got to kind of play with the faders and the dials on your little commentary box to make sure that everybody's at the level that you want them to be at, and nobody's trying to speak to you and blowing your ears off.
It's a real skill set that watching Gary Lineker or watching anyone on sort of Match of the Day or the TV shows, you're not necessarily thinking about how much is going on in their ears, about what they've got to transition to, what they've got to move to. We just think they're talking and dissecting the game. But it's a skill. It's an absolute skill set. Yeah. It's not something that, with the presenting and the bits and pieces that I've done, I've never experienced it, but I've been told, and there's other guys like yourself that takes a hell of a lot of learning, and that takes a hell of a lot of skill to get to that level of being able to keep a conversation going. And all of a sudden the direction changes because the director's got to take you to that picture or to that start or that. Absolutely. I mean, it's full on. Yeah,
it is. It's hectic. You do get used to it, and you do learn to, you almost have I guess your brain sort of becomes a very nimble sound mixer internally, and you learn to sort of fade up the ones you need and fade down the ones you don't need so much internally, as the situation evolves, and as the broadcast plays out. But yeah, it can be tricky, and it is something that I'd say I struggled with that quite a bit at the start, to the point where the temptation is when I first started out, just like turn everything down, just turn it down, focus on your commentary. And while that's maybe not a terrible practice for your first couple, if you're not hearing the director, if you've got the director turned away down so you can't hear him or her, then you're completely cream crackered if they're telling you something important, or they're telling you, do the man of the match now, or we need to throw to break, or this is coming up on screen, or let's go to a shot of this, or we don't have that replay that you're talking about, whatever it may be. So things like that, you've always had that temptation to just try and, I need to block this out. But actually, I think the real skill is learning to assimilate all that and use it, because that's what makes the broadcast slick. People don't see it, people don't hear it. I think it's fascinating. Nick Mullins, who I think is one of the greatest commentators of all time, and somebody who I would regard as a massive inspiration. He's tweeted a couple of videos you might have seen where it's a clip of his commentary, and he's got all the voices playing out in the video, and it's like, wow. And for that is what it sounds like for an hour and a half of rugby or football. And you've got the director kind of softly telling you which angles, which camera, this and that. And quite often he or she will be speaking to the camera operators as well, going, right, Steve, get me this. Steve, no, go wider. No, you're too much sky. Pan down, things like that. So there's a lot going on, but it's all part of the fun, I guess. All part of the chaos.
Jake Humphrey, he spoke about it when he did Formula One, obviously onto football and everything like that. But the noise of the cars in the background, let alone the directors talking to him, who's coming on next? There's someone coming along the pit lane. Get to them, Jake. He said it was definitely one of the toughest skills to pick up. But I mean, he's mastered it. He's got to where he is today. But yeah, absolute skill set. Are there any sports out there, anything you'd love to commentate on, or you'd love to sort of be standing there after the match and interview man of the match, player of the game, things like that?
You know, before the Olympics, I'd have probably said, not necessarily. I mean, football and rugby are always my two passions, are the two sports that I played when I was younger and still try to play when commitments around work and family allow. But just after that stint in Tokyo, I was assigned to the para athletics for the kind of the 10 days that they were on, and part of that it was a written gig and a lot of mix zone interviews that were just being transcribed and put out on what's called the Olympic News Service, which is a news agency effectively for the world media to gather pertinent quotes and put out on their channels. But I also did a bit of TV work out there, covering for somebody who had to leave early, and just being trackside. You're literally about 12 feet, 15 feet from the finish line in the Olympic Stadium. And you're interviewing all these medalists as they come off. And you're getting these moments of just raw elation, emotion, the tears, the ecstasy, everything you could possibly imagine. And that was incredible. And the Paralympics, I must admit, I was pretty ignorant to what it entailed, to all the different classifications that are involved, and there are many of them.
Yeah,
and the different degrees of severity of impairment, how that's sort of classified. And it was, I mean, the stories you hear out there are, they're mind-blowing, utterly mind-blowing. And everybody there has got an incredibly inspirational tale of triumphing in the face of adversity. And more than, someone like me, cushy middle-class upbringing, no real hardship in life. Yes, I dropped out of uni, but Christ, what's that? It's a couple of years of your life at 19 that you spend too much time in the pub and not enough time looking at PowerPoint presentations. Mm-hmm. These guys have had just the most horrific hardships, and interviewing some of them, you're almost welling up yourself. And actually, I found the kind of the buzz and the thrill and the fast-paced nature of race after race after race of the athletics really fun, and that's a sport that I hadn't been particularly interested in before, but it's definitely something I would be keen to work on again if I ever got the opportunity.
And that whole Olympic experience without fans,
did
you speak to people that have been to the previous Olympics and saying, wait till you come back, wait 4 years, wait till you come back and there's fans, and how it's going to escalate it again?
Yeah, it was funny, like we had there was a few sort of broadcast colleagues who were there, from a couple of guys who worked for RTE, guys who worked for some of the Kiwi TV channels as well, and they were, I wouldn't say they were veterans, but they've been to quite a few of these events before, and they said, just wait, this is actually, I mean, the two schools of thought. One, you've had it great because there's no fans, there's no extra distractions, it's you've been eased into it, and because it's Tokyo, everything is uber efficient, so there's no the media bus turns up when it's bloody supposed to turn up. You don't need to worry about waiting half an hour for, let's say, a more European laid-back style of bus driver to come in and collect you. Everything runs to time. The train leaves the second it's supposed to leave, not a second before, a second after. She's like, you've had it quite easy actually coming to this one, but also it has been tough in other aspects because of the same thing, the lack of fans. You haven't had the same spectacle. The city isn't as open and vibrant and jumping as it would be if there were thousands and thousands of fans from other countries, journalists, athletes that weren't just confined to the athletes' village. So I guess you could look at it from either perspective, but for sure, I think it's one of these ones where if I get the chance to go again, and I really hope I do get the chance to go to Paris or a Winter Olympics perhaps in the future, I think you'll appreciate it all the more so, because that was hopefully, please, let's say that's a one-off. Hopefully we never have to go through something like that again with there aren't fans and grounds. But I think it will be all the more special if and when I get to go again, and there is an 80,000 capacity Olympic Athletic Stadium, and you're standing in it going, bloody hell, this is 10 notches higher than it was 4-8 years ago.
Absolutely. Have you caught up with anyone that was over with the Lions? Have you got any pals that were reporting over there? Or?
Not really, no. I mean, it's mostly guys from the sort of main newspapers down south that I'm not too pally with, or just haven't had the chance to spend a great deal of time with. From listening to some of the podcasts, listening to the Times Rugby podcast now and again, and it seems like the guys that were there made the best of it, and enjoy the experience for what it was. And I think they were obviously under far more severe restrictions than we were. I mean, we had a 2-week soft quarantine, which was you can go out to go to venues and to go to work, but for no other reason for the first 2 weeks. You couldn't go to shops, you couldn't go for a beer, you couldn't go sightseeing, but you could leave your hotel to go to a stadium or the media centre or a press conference or whatever. Thereafter, it was you can do whatever you want within the rules of the current time. So you were treated as though you were a Japanese resident. Whereas the guys and girls on tour with the Lions, I think, had a much more restricted time of it in terms of being stuck in hotels and not really being able to do much besides. I'm not even sure if they could get a drink at various points to lubricate themselves during the sort of long weeks on tour. And it's funny, I was speaking to the pal of mine about the constraints that players were under as well recently, because we're just there as journalists, and yes, it's tough. You're away from family, and it's not a particularly fun environment to be in when you're bubbled up. But for the players, I mean, when you're just going literally hotel to train, to hotel to train, to hotel to stadium to play, to back to hotel again, for 10 weeks away from your partners, your families, your kids, that's bloody tough, and you've got all the pressure that comes with actually playing at that level, when a once in a 4-year opportunity against the world champions, against that backdrop, that's brutal. So yeah, I wouldn't be crying too much about my experience anyway in Tokyo when you look at some of the stuff that other people have had to deal with. No,
I know. I see what you mean. What was your sort of feel with the Lions tour ended? Putting your journalism hat on, what did you sort of sit back and review it?
I didn't watch a great deal of it because I think we would have been 7 hours ahead in Tokyo. So a lot of the games are on quite antisocial times. And I made a big friend from South Africa, a guy called Keith Moore, who's a rugby journalist for Sky Sports and was part of our team out there. A terrific bloke. So he and I watched a few of the games and some of the rugby championship games as well, just in the hotel, and scratchy laptop feeds and stuff. Shouldn't say that because he works for Sky Sports. They were great feeds. So we crack open a beer and watch that. And the general consensus from us and from people who were watching it back home was that it was just a bit of a kind of dog of a tour. It just felt like it was a slog. The rugby on show was not particularly inspiring in a lot of the games. It was well documented. You had all of the sort of brouhaha around Rassie Erasmus and his hour-long video, a sort of hostage video around referees and everything like that.
Did you like that? Did you take to that well, as in he's taking the shine off the players here, or?
I mean, I'm not sure. There was a South African guy in our team, not Big Keith, who was very much Team Rassie and very adamant that it's everything he says is correct. It's quite correct. And just when I went off on a tirade about it, I was like, okay, mate, it's a game of rugby, calm down. I don't know. I mean, there's two schools of thought, and I haven't sat and watched it all the way through because the hours we were pulling it there were pretty drastic. And you've got an hour in your bed at midnight or an hour to watch Rassie Erasmus dissect. It was at Luke Pearce's refereeing performance, or I can't remember which referee it was. So I haven't gone through in its entirety, but I don't like the notion that you can come out and I guess completely dissect the referee's performance like that. Referees are accountable, like it or not, they are accountable. And I just think, I understand why he's done it, and I understand why he's almost tempting fate a little bit by saying things like, well, if SA Rugby Board want me to go, then I'll follow my sword. He's almost sort of daring World Rugby or daring someone in a position of authority to say, you've gone too far. So he takes all the flack and he takes it away from the players, as you say. That I understand, but what he's done is take the flack away from the players and transfer it onto the poor referee and the officials. And look, I know from being out there, they were trying. I think their aim was to try and get World Rugby to respond and to stoke a bit of a fire there. And the World Rugby guys who were actually in Tokyo with us, and absolutely thrilled all that was kicking off from a PR perspective whilst they were trying to market the Olympics. They're just like, we're not going to deal with this. We're not going to put a statement out just now. We'll deal with it after the tour. We've told both camps, no more of this, just play the rugby. Which I think was the right approach, because they were going to get drawn into a war of words with the DOR of the world champions, which isn't a pretty unseemly look. But I just thought it was a little bit disappointing when one of the great things in rugby, and one of the things that I must say I loathe whenever I play or commentate or encounter football, is the way that the referees are spoken to in both sports. It's so different. And in football, still even at professional level, you'll go and watch the TV and you don't need to be the world's best lip reader to pick up some of the stuff that's been just the bile that's been spouted at the officials for giving an offside.
Even the way they run at them and crowd them.
Yeah, exactly that. I was watching Hibs v St Johnstone on just on Sunday there. I'm on my way back from a Super 6 game at Bridge Hall, which by the way was an absolute belter.
I wasn't going to bring that up.
Beloved Watsonians, sorry about
that. I saw your clip today, and the commentary was great. Commentary was good, but the result went the wrong way.
What a game! But no, I was watching that with the Hibs v St Johnstone on the way back from Stirling, and John Beaton gave a controversial penalty to Hibs in that game, and 5 or 6 St Johnstone players all around them, and they were raging because they felt it wasn't a penalty, and they're probably correct to the letter of the law. But that kind of thing, it just doesn't really occur in rugby, and I'm really glad that it doesn't, that we still have that. For all the things that the game evolves, becomes more professional, certain less desirable traits and elements do creep into the game. But I think that's one thing that we need to be really careful about. And I didn't like the way that referee was kind of publicly singled out. Referees are reviewed all the time and assessed all the time, and they are. Listen, if they're not performing, they don't get the big gigs. They don't, and there's a perception. You speak to Wayne Barnes or to one of the experienced guys who's been dropped from the elite panel for perceived poor performance, because his bosses and the people who assess how he's doing have decided you're not performing well enough, so you're not getting the top level gigs until such times as you prove it's a form slump. It's not unlike a player who's not performing well doesn't get picked. So there's a false perception that referees aren't accountable, and they are. And the element of the bubble as well meant that actually getting the neutral TMO. I mean, personally, I don't think it matters a toss if you're a South African TMO looking after a box game or working on a box game. It shouldn't matter. Because even by the very notion that you're saying it needs to be a neutral TMO, you're almost acknowledging that it matters what country referee's from. And I don't think it should. You're almost saying, well, there's an implicit bias there because you're dealing with your own country. I mean, I would never be. It's not the same, but I would never be biased. I don't think any other commentator would ever be biased commentating on an Edinburgh, Glasgow, or Scotland game as a commentator. You've got to be entirely neutral, and even more so when you're directly involved in officiating the game. So, no, I would rather we didn't have any of that. But having not watched the thing in its entirety, the video in its entirety, I can't give too much insight on the kind of rights and wrongs of the minutiae of what he said.
How does when you head to a weekend, if you know you're going to Bridge Hall, you know you're going down to the Sale match, what's that, the AJ Bell? What's the Sale stadium?
Yeah, AJ Bell, yeah.
You can be all over the place. How do you just got to cram in your prep? You got to cram in the team sheets, everything. Have you got sort of strict things that you stick to? Have you got like a big sheet like the old Bill McLaren?
I do, yeah.
Something like that you can sort of look at and refer to and get the research in prior to...
I'm a total cheat because my big sheets are done electronically, not by hand, unlike the legend, the Doyen himself. I've actually got my hiding somewhere in my parents' house up in the northeast. I'm not sure. Mum probably won't listen to this, but if she does, sorry. My dad bought it at a silent auction and sort of came over to me one day and said, "Son, I've got you a gift. You know how you were going to get that watch of mine when I die?" And I was like, "Jesus, Dad, you all right? Where are we going with this?" He's like, I said, "Well, your wee brother's getting that." And I was like, "Right, okay." He's like, "I've got you something better. Wait to see this." He pulls out this framed big sheet, I think from a Calcutta Cup match, signed by Jim Telfer, Hoggy, Stuart Hogg, Rory Lawson, Doddy Weir, I think Gavin Hastings and Andy Irvine. There's 5 or 6 proper kind of Scottish Galactical signatures on there. One of the big sheets, and I've no idea how much that cost him. I think he told me to put a bid in for it, thinking I'll not get it, and then that was the top bid. So I suspect a portion of the old RAF pension has been squirreled away on that one, and it's hiding under a sofa bed somewhere in my house up the road. I'm still not sure Mum is aware of its existence, so I pull out and have a wee look at it whenever I go and visit. Well, yeah, when I finally get a size 12 on the property ladder, then I'll find a home for that.
They're legendary.
That place, but yeah. As for big sheets, yes, I do have one. I have just an A3 sheet with the team lineups down each side with a little bit of, well, hopefully quite a lot of information on each player, and then in the middle, I do the middle bit by hand. So I'll scribble. I'll have little categories divvied up. I'll have a blue pen for one team and a red pen for the other team, and have head-to-head form. I'll have stats on their attack and defence, the records in terms of, from very simple things like tries scored, conceded, point score conceded, 2 tries off first phase, conceded, mull tries scored. Certain teams, that can take a bit of work unless you've got, if you're not working for like a BT, you have got people who compile all that and provide you with an incredible level of detail. You've got to then, it's easy to start the season, but once you're 12 games in a season, you've got to spool through and be like, right, okay, how many mull tries have Leicester Tigers scored? But it's worth it when they're about to score a mull try and you're able to say that's their 18th mull try of the season or whatever, because it shows a trend there. It shows a real strength in their game plan. And I think as a commentator, it's important to give that, particularly if, as is often the case for highlights games, like which I do for the English Premiership, you don't have a pundit. You don't have somebody there who's well briefed on it. It's just you solo. So you need to have a lot of information for those games, and you need to be able to access it quickly. Therefore, I think, the way I do it may not be right. It may not work for some people. I may find a better way of doing it as I go along. But for me, I know where everything on that sheet is. I can access it quickly. I know I'm not worrying about, I'd like to think I've got relatively neat handwriting for a 27-year-old bloke, but I'm not worrying about, Christ, is that an E or a C when I'm trying to figure out what a word says, because it's typed up. So all that's in front of me. In the week, I suppose I structure it. I look at the general sort of story and the narrative around the game first. So you would look at basically what does this game mean? What's it all about? What kind of styles are we talking about here? What kind of form records have we got? What are the teams like at home and away, and vice versa? How's their attack been? How's their defence been? I've watched some footage of the teams, which thankfully now in this day and age is very, very readily available. As commentators, we sometimes get access to some of the stats providers, like Opta and companies like that. We'll occasionally be lucky enough to get a login as rights holding broadcasters to go back and spool through footage and be able to watch a game in its entirety rather than a 5-minute edit. Which is massive for player identification if it's a team you haven't done before. Super 6 being a great case in point. I'd never commentated on a lot of, probably 90% of the guys, because I hadn't done a lot of rugby out with the pro game and out with the Scottish pro game. So you're then looking at, you've got to make sure you can identify George Arnott and not confuse him with, Byron Bowes, or, you can identify Grant Hughes and Archie Russell at 12 and 13 and not confuse the two of them for Stirling County. So, because it's hugely important. Sometimes people maybe think, it's a wee game on a Sunday, it's Super 6, it's semi-pro, it's not an international, but you still got to do it the same justice and give it the same level of prep as you would anything else. You hear Nigel Owen speaking about, I think the games that he has said have tripped him up in the past is when he's gone from doing, Scotland, England on a Saturday to going down his local club and helping out with an under-8s game, and actually he's making mistakes left, right and centre because he's been caught out by something the kids have done. So you need to have that rigour across the board, and I like to have a setup where I'll do that at the start of the week and get all my kind of background information done, and then as you get closer to game day, I'll fill in the team lineups with what you've got a reasonable guess as to who's going to be playing, and then obviously on the Thursday or the Friday lunchtime when the teams are announced, you can then finalise that, print it off, annotate it, and you're hopefully good to go. Just revise it.
And do you get much time to go out and sort of sniff out your own stories, find the background of a player that you didn't know about, and do some sort of old school journalism and that sort of thing? Does that happen?
Yeah, I think that's probably slightly harder to do now in the sense of, you hear Bill McLaren and the kind of the legends of yesteryear. Like Mullen still does this as often as he can. He'll go to the training and watch training and actually speak to DORs and coaches, and because there's a relationship built up there, they understand that these guys are there as commentators. They're not there as kind of beat reporters to try and dig up a story. It's not going to go any further until such times as the player in question is on the TV during the match. It's not going to be broadcast to the world until the game is on, by which point it doesn't really matter if he's got a great right hand off or whatever, because the other team's already conceded 2 tries to, for example. So that is really useful. Getting the chance to do that for me is a wee bit difficult because a lot of the teams I cover are down south. So I would need to go down to Manchester or Newcastle or possibly even further afield to get some face time with those coaches and DORs and players and watch them train. From a player identification perspective, it's really good. You just pick up wee nuggets that you wouldn't necessarily get if you were just doing it off what's readily available. But I do think, for all I'm saying, I struggle to do that for geographical reasons. You tend to rely on your contacts a bit as well. So even guys who work at the club, media managers, communications people, when they're talking to you, are often really useful and really helpful, and will give you a steer on things, because they know you're not going to write a story in it. You're there you're speaking to them as a commentator, and they're eager to get these stories out there as well, because generally speaking, they're positive ones. I was at a couple of guys that work at Sale, they're brilliant blokes and really helpful. Where I was on the phone to a couple of them a week and a half ago before I did their opener against Bath, and they were telling me all the stuff Tulangi was doing in the background, and yoga and a bit of dancing to rehab his calf, his ankle, his hamstring, and all the rest of it. And 6 kilos lighter than he was at the end of the season. They're trying to get leaner and keep him from getting injured. And it's not revolutionary stuff, but it's just nice wee bits and pieces that you can then sort of lace into your commentary that add another layer of of detail and insight that the man or woman on the street isn't necessarily privy to unless it's come out in press.
Yeah, it's fascinating, mate. It's fascinating. I love it. I love the whole background to the broadcasting, to the effort that goes into you guys lighting up a game. The commentary, you do see that. You see Ali McCoist in football at the moment. People are loving the chat that he comes out. I was fortunate enough to do a Doddy event. It was Doddy Gump last January, and Ali McCoist popped in and out of the chat throughout the day. He was the highlight of the day. Every time he came in, he would throw in the funnies, he would tell the Gaza stories. It's all these things he's picked up over the years, which just, he tells tales, and he speaks knowledgeably. So it's
it's hilarious. He's brilliant. I mean, I was lucky enough to work with him on a couple of football semi-finals in what was the Betfred and it's now the Premier Sports Cup last year. And just, again, you just kind of shut up and listen to him in the truck when you're sort of preparing to go on air. I was down as the trackside reporter. He was up in the stand, so I didn't get a lot of time chatting to him, but just a lovely, genuine bloke. And as you say, so witty. And I'm glad he's getting the recognition as a co-com that he deserves, because he's also a really good analyst. Like, he's hilarious and his chat's brilliant, but he's also a very insightful pundit too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it tells, because, as I say, that you can tell a lot from Twitter and all the trolls out there, but when you see somebody trending and it's because they've done well, it's always good to see. But Jamie, we've flown over the amount of time I told you we'd be on for, but I really appreciate it. It's been brilliant catching up. We maybe could have done this a long time ago, but Olympics, COVID, all these things have happened, and we've finally done it. So thank you very much for coming on. It's been really, really interesting.
No, Nashy, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for thinking of me. It's flattering that anybody thinks, apart from like your mum and dad and your gran, who frequently confuses me for Alistair Lamont and other BBC commentators that she hears on the radio when she's trying to find the Archers or, I don't know, some sort of talk show, that anybody's actually interested in what little I've done in life. So, no, mate, it's an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much for taking an interest.
Good on you, mate, and we'll catch up soon, all right?
All the best, Nashy. Cheers.
Cheers.